Well, good morning, everybody. Here's the plan for today. We're going to talk first about Hurricane Beryl and its eventual kind of movement toward the west into Mexico. It's going to be several days from now, but it will get into parts of Mexico. We need to see what that's going to do to the drought that's been ongoing there. We're then going to talk about maybe if Beryl gets into the southern United States where it could deliver some rainfall. I'm next going to talk a bit about the upper Midwest, the northwestern Corn Belt flooding, and what's expected to continue there and its impact on the river system in that area, especially eventually on the Mississippi. We'll get into our normal 5-model analysis after we look at the severe weather threat over the next couple of days. We'll look at the temperature pattern, which is really going to be reflective of a large western ridge and the heat wave that'll hit the west because of that. We'll take a look at some new long-range information from the European model just as some guidance, and I'll compare it to some ocean temperatures. I'll talk a bit more about the hurricane season and finish up with a 10-day outlook for the globe. That's the plan. You've been looking here, though, at an image, and sorry I left the mouse right on top of it, but that's Beryl. And what's great about this is we're going to be using, the satellite called Aqua, on which we have an instrument called MODIS. And MODIS is a scanning type satellite. So in other words, it's scanning across this swath right here. In other words, it doesn't look straight down all the time. It's got a mirror that oscillates. So it has lower resolution on the edges of the scan and its highest resolution in the middle. And what's important about that is that the Aqua, which is the one that comes over in the afternoon, Terra's in the morning, the hurricane was right in the middle of the swath, which means we grab the highest resolution view of Beryl. And I'm going to zoom in on it in just a few moments. But later, I'm going to talk about this. This is a lot of Saharan dust. You can see it here in the discoloration. Now, this is glint. This is sun glint here, but this is Saharan dust. We'll come back to that in a few moments. But I want you to take note of the waves, what we call African easterly waves that continue to come off of the Sahel, which is kind of the birthplace for a lot of our Atlantic hurricanes. All right, with all of that, let's get in here and have a look at this, because after it went over the Lesser Antilles, including Trinidad and Tobago, and then here, after it passed, take a look at this. We got a good view on the inside of it. So when you pass right in the middle of the swath, you can see the highest resolution. And I've only seen this from the Hurricane Hunter, but the stadium effect on a Cat 5 hurricane like this is just incredible. I remember Old Busch Stadium where the Cardinals played, up until they rebuilt it. And I love the new stadium, but Old Busch reminds me a lot of what it's like to be in the eye of a hurricane. Just, of course, much, much, much bigger than this. Incredible to see a wall of clouds 12 kilometers tall. Now, for a lot of hurricane experts, they can use the structure of the little swirls on the inside of this and their symmetry to understand overall what's going on with the hurricane. It's just one component of their knowledge of it. But I'll tell you this, on satellite this morning, this is infrared data, but here's the sunrise. This is an extremely symmetric hurricane. It's nothing in the environment is disrupting it right now. And that's why it hit Category 5 in strength yesterday. And I believe this morning it's still maintaining winds of 155 miles an hour. This is, again, a great website. A guy by the name of Tomer Berg puts it out there for us. arctic.som.ou.edu. Great site. T-Berg is what you got to put after that to see these graphics. But what he's got summarized here for us is the projected path and the strength from the National Hurricane Center over the next 120 hours. And as you can see, it's going to pass just to the south of Jamaica. And the problem here is that this will put the north side of the hurricane, which is its right-hand side, the more destructive side, over Jamaica. So there's a lot of concern about the path when it gets to this point. If it shifts at all to the north, we need to be very aware of that. But as we note, it goes over the Yucatan. This would be 72 hours from now, so we're talking about Thursday night, Friday morning, and then this will eventually get into this part of Mexico. And I'm going to talk about this here in a few moments. But I wanted to show you the latest forecast. These are ensemble plots from 4 different models, as you can see here. And we're just trying to get an idea on the spread. Now, just as a reminder, the spread in this cone, this is the National Weather Service cone, this spread is based entirely on their historical track error. So the width of it at 72 hours, it's always going to be the same because they're using their historical track error to encapsulate where the thing could go. It does not use the ensemble. But as you can take note of here, as this goes across the Yucatan, which seems to be a pretty solid forecast overall, it gets into the Bay of Campeche, and then the upper level atmospheric winds begin to turn this. And what I want to know is, does it deliver rain through parts of eastern Texas into the Delta and eventually into the Ohio River Valley, which you know is a spot that's been relatively dry? That's going to be a conversation for a few moments. Before that, though, I want to show you the latest North American drought monitor. So this is released on May it's released middle of the month, but it only has data on it through the end of the month. So this does not include what happened in June. But it's just to stress the extensiveness of the drought that was in Mexico. But as you know, we had we had Tropical Storm Alberto go through, and it is what delivered some of this moisture in through here. And the Yucatan's already been hit with some heavy rainfall, also supplemented by stronger trades. So this is the last month when you look at kind of a drought severity index map. And I just pull this up because I want to show you over the next 15 days what the precipitation anomalies look like. This drought in Mexico has been extremely important for several reasons, but because I focus largely on agriculture, that has been my top priority here. And what we take note of here is that we could have anomalous rains over the next 15 days that are adding up to additional 2 to 3, in some places even a bit more, rainfall than average. And remember, we're in the tropics here, so this is wet. I mentioned this yesterday, I believe, but I did check in on this way down here. This the Lake Gatun, I think is how you say it, in the middle of the Panama Canal, and it is back up to normal levels, and so you can see that it's quite wet down there as well. But this turn will have to be watched carefully because this could really hit a large area of our cotton belt down here to the delta as well. That could really get a good soaking of rain out of what's left from Beryl. So we need to watch it for the next about 10 days. All right. Back to the U.S. Just want to show you some satellite data from yesterday. Very clear where we've got our ring of fire precipitation pattern setting up. At a front that cleared the northeast, the lingering tail of which added a bit more storm activity down into parts of South Carolina, Georgia. From yesterday's analysis, this is an area that extends not just here, but all the way up into the mid-Atlantic with drought. So it's good to see storms in that area. Large storm complexes, though, rolling through the midsection of the country. We're going to watch those throughout the day today press east. But at the end of this animation, a lot of haze in the sky, some wildfire here in the southern plains. But I did take note over here in California, we had a fire. If we just go have a quick look at it, this was late in the afternoon. There we can see some of that wildfire smoke. It's also just fascinating to look at the way that the flow goes around these islands. You can often get these little vortices that spin up called I think they're called von Karman vortices. I'll have to go look that up again. I see one of them right there. That's pretty fascinating to look at. Okay, so last 72 hours of total rainfall through 6 a.m. this morning. Got a message yesterday from a good friend of mine, Arlen Suderman. He lives around Kansas City. He said his gauge topped 6 inches, and we can clearly see that the radar estimates plus the National Weather Service rain gauge data, which is what goes into this product, was definitely showing that heavy, heavy rain from those storms. And that's not the only spot. I mean, just in the last 3 days, look at how many areas locally saw incredibly heavy rainfall from the way that the storms are rolling around this ridge right now. Now, just to let you know, Arlen is the kind of guy that empties his gauge, so don't think it's got like a month's worth of rain in it, but that's heavy, heavy rain into this area. But I was also talking a lot with folks that are along the Mississippi River yesterday, including a good friend of mine, Brent Clare, and his concern about the Mississippi River and what's coming down it. So first, though, I want to show you some of these storms were putting down some pretty streaky hail across the country over the last 3 days. And this is what I've got in terms of maximum estimated hail size from radar. And it just reminds me, I haven't talked for a while about the severe weather reports. And this is what the data looked like from June. June was a very active month, 165 tornadoes, over 3,100 reports of severe wind, and almost 800 reports of hail. Now, May, of course, takes the cake. If we just go back to it, just an incredible amount of severe weather. But annually, 2024 is going to go down as one of our more active severe weather years on record, and we're halfway done with it. We still have a lot to go. But again, all of these large storm complexes, especially the ones that have hit this section of the country, will eventually have to feed into the river system. And it's interesting to note that the Mississippi right now is only 7 feet above low stage. And the major reason for this is that, remember, the Mississippi at Memphis has major contributions from the river systems that are a part of the Ohio Valley, and especially the Ohio River. And that's been on the dry side of things. But the upper Midwest and the Western Corn Belt is where we're continuing to see our problems. So Brent was talking to me about some of the issues we're having along and trying to manage the river. And as you look at this color shading here, we've got several gauges that are forecast, 18 of them that are forecast to be in major flood stage in the very near term. And this just goes back to pointing out the significant rainfall issues that are hitting the Western Corn Belt over the last several weeks. I was just thinking this morning, I know I've shown this to you lately, but let's just keep looking at the updated maps. This is the newest updated map from, mid-spring through July the 1st, just looking at total precipitation ranks by climate district. And it's these ones in here that are just, this is a staggering amount of rainfall on some of the best farm ground in the Midwest. And this extends throughout much of the upper Midwest here, but just one of the top 5 wettest springs on record. Outside of that, we'll come back to what's going on in the West very soon as I start talking about some of the temperatures. But this issue in the mid-Atlantic, getting up into parts of the Northeast and then down the coast, this spring has been tough to buy good rains in certain places in this area, which we have to continue to watch because as I showed yesterday, drought is expanding in this region pretty rapidly. Okay, so at 6:40 this morning, this is what we have in terms of our all hazards weather map. That same spot, flood watches, all these polygons you see here around the rivers, those represent where the river is in flood stage. To the south of it, this is the heat. This is where the flow is going around. And so we've got excessive heat watches and warnings and heat advisories here in this region. But the west, you're going to see a lot of these colors in the west for the next several days as this ridge builds into the west. And so already we're seeing up through the I-5, almost the entirety of the I-5 corridor here, excessive heat watches and warnings. And it is going to get very, very hot in this region, which we're going to come back to in just a few moments. Okay, early this morning, let me pause this. Just looking at some radar data. In fact, let's blow it up a little bit. The storms that rolled through the plains yesterday are a part of a low that's curling up out of Manitoba into Ontario. And again, the Canadian prairie has just seen a tremendous amount of rain and cool weather this year. But the storms this morning sitting right into this area will be key to understanding where we're going to get severe weather this afternoon and this evening. And just looking at some active lightning strikes, if I can get this to upload. I'm still kind of tethering from my phone, so my internet's a bit slow here while I'm on vacation. But just some storms this morning we're going to watch. This afternoon, keep an eye out for parts of Iowa, along the Mississippi River here in Illinois, into Missouri, back into Nebraska and Kansas. That's where we have the risk later today for the risk of strong to severe storms. By tomorrow, you can see the front pretty clearly, where we're expecting to have the strong to severe storm risk. And this is now getting into the 4th of July. Again, we were watching the Storm Prediction Service keeping an eye on parts of Missouri and surrounding areas on the 4th. To see how it plays out, let's just go have a quick look at the high-res NAM. Picking this up at 8 a.m. I think was a good initialization, just looking at where there were storms. So we'll put a little bit of trust in it. And what we notice is that later this afternoon, this evening, that will be where we reinitiate these storms in this region. And we're expecting them to build right across that area that's got the enhanced risk by late tonight. That's at least according to the high-res NAM's forecast. Meanwhile, the front stretches farther to the south to the Panhandle of Texas, even all the way down here to this part of Mexico. And on the back side of this system, some scattered storms coming through parts of Montana, the Canadian prairie, into the northern plains. So this is tonight on Tuesday night. We're playing this out tomorrow through the early morning hours on Wednesday, stretching it out to Wednesday afternoon and evening. So there's the lingering front we mentioned, and the isolated convection we could see back in the plains on this, but more storms down here near the panhandles as well. As we play all the way through the early morning hours on the 4th of July to about midday 4th of July, we're going to watch our next system rolling through this area here on Thursday, and the remnants of the previous one coming through parts of the Ohio Valley here. I think the NAM had a pretty good handle on this, so I like this simulation. But as we normally do, we just stretch it out to our 5 models. So let's shrink that up so you can see it properly. This is the artificial intelligence forecast for the next 7 days. This is what we've got from the NBM. And in both of these simulations, seeing better storm chances down here is critical. But this region, this is pretty high probability here of grabbing another inch to 2 inches of rainfall. It's going to hit that same area we just stressed that's under these already saturated soils and flooded rivers. So we're going to have to watch this carefully going forward. So that's the NBM. This is the WPC forecast, very similar. You can even see how it's trying to grab some of the moisture from Beryl here coming into parts of Texas and Louisiana. And then this is the ECMWF. Now the operational run of the ECMWF will leave Beryl pretty far to the south into Mexico. You can see though the band of heaviest rain here. But also what I like about this is that we're seeing more storms in the Ohio Valley, which is needed from this pattern as well. Last model would be the GFS. And if we get in here and just take a look at some probabilities, this is where I think we get some really solid information on what might be going on here. This is the chance at 2 inches. And that's a large area here that's already saturated that has a better than 50% chance of getting 2 inches of rainfall. And what's enhancing this corridor right in through here would be the remnants of Beryl. This is over the next 10 days, so it's out to July the 12th. So we'll need to see how the moisture gets in here following the fronts that sink through this area as well. All right. So how does this all shake down? Well, I think the pattern's going to tell us the story here. As we go forward, this is Beryl. These are the much deeper extratropical lows that are going through the Canadian Prairie over into eastern Canada. And so through the 4th of July, this will be the shortwave that initiates the risk of stronger storms here, keeping the heat to the south, but a cool down for much of the Canadian Prairie getting into the northern U.S. Remember, by Friday into Saturday is when we see the kind of very extensive ridge build into the west. We'll take a look at those temperatures in a few moments. And the artificial intelligence forecast system wants to just plant a trough over the Hudson Bay. And if this does sit here, that's what's going to help amplify the size of this ridge into early next week, next Tuesday into Wednesday. But we do notice, and this has been pretty consistent in the models, that this ridge opens up in the midsection of the country by next Friday. And if we end up getting flow that does something like this will give us a drier look, I think, for a little while here in the central United States, slowing stuff down in this region into week 2. But, playing it out there, just letting the model do its thing, getting all the way out there, this is pretty far out. We're 14 days in the forecast. Do you see what I see? That's not gone anywhere. We just keep this high momentum flow coming through, and that's been a key factor to all of this spring and early summer weather. So to compare the models, let's go have a quick look at them. GFS left, European right. Playing this forward, we've already seen through Wednesday. Let's get this out there to Thursday evening. So this will be about the time a lot of fireworks are getting prepped. There's our next low. That's the one that's going to give us the severe storm risk into this area on Thursday night. So there it is, curling up over parts of Minnesota. So this is not good for firework viewing here. Take a look at the difference between the European and the GFS in Ohio, for example. This is where the models tend to struggle with convection and seeing how that's going to play out. So we'll watch that carefully as well. Just going forward into Friday and Saturday, there will be showers on the back side of this that come in around the upper Midwest. Front clears the southeast. We need the rain out of this, so this has got to come through and produce. And here's the difference between the European and the GFS on where Beryl will be. So going through Sunday into Monday, what's interesting is that the GFS by Tuesday afternoon is starting to pull the moisture from Beryl into Texas, where the operational European leaves it way down in Mexico. But the European is taking what feels like some moisture on the northern side and just putting it into this whole region of the southeast. And just take note that by next Tuesday into Wednesday, we're seeing plenty of storm activity in the models in, the Ohio and Mississippi basin. Looking out there, that's, about a week and beyond. That seems to be a stormier corridor until we get out there past about the 12th or 13th. And it's at that point that we start to see a drier signal from the northwest all the way through the northern plains, upper Midwest. And it's now in both the CPC update and in the European. Pretty clear signal here. But this will be, I think, what's left from Beryl kind of moving into this area. And that GFS dry bias, I really need to investigate this more, why it's so dry here in summer. But that's something to think about. Let's talk temperatures next. I want to show you again the June temperature ranks. We just spent a moment on this yesterday about how cool it's been across the north and how very hot it's been in the southwest. But take a look at these climate reporting districts right along the California coast. So much of May and then June had the marine stratocumulus layer really just invading this region, giving us what they call the June gloom in that region. But I wanted to pull up a GDD anomaly map. So I started the calculation on April 1, and so the numbers represent the difference from normal in terms of the accumulation of heat units using a base of 50 and a max of 86. And so what you take note of here is that much of the Northwest, parts of Montana, North Dakota, This is critical here because if there was any late planted crop and you're already off by 50 to 70 GDDs, this is going to be an issue with now starting to run into any, and maybe an on-time frost or an early frost can impact the crop in this area. And as you can imagine, this extends into the Canadian prairie as well, even though the data for this data set is only for the U.S. Take a look at California, though. That's that marine stratocumulus layer and its influence right along the coast here, which is just now beginning to fade. Okay, temperature-wise, today's highs, very, very hot in California's Central Valley, hot in the southern plains, but already tell where that front's gone through and where the rain-cooled air is on the backside. So this is Tuesday into Wednesday. And Thursday, look at the cool air coming in on Thursday behind that frontal boundary, while the west just sees triple-digit heat, almost north to south along the I-5, and then, of course, getting into the interior here. So on Friday, that's when the ridge is really beginning to extend. 115 to 120 is possible in the Central Valley. 101 as far north as like Portland, Salem area. And up here even toward like Yakima, we'll probably crack the triple-digit number. And meanwhile, a big cool down for this point in July coming through the midsection of the country while heat lines the south up the East Coast. Getting into the weekend, the disparity really shows up here as the west just takes on the heat and keeps it going into early next week. The day 5 through 10 shows the same thing, and day 10 through 15 has it as well. So that ridge will likely not live the entirety of the next 2-week time frame. I think it starts to break down at some point, but this is going to put some pretty tremendous demand for cooling in the west, and it's going to take evaporation rates probably up to 3 inches a week in places out west where there is water to evaporate. Just playing this out, that was day 5 through 10. We're working our way out to day 10 through 15. If we can actually bring some heat into here with that ridge opening up, the Canadian prairie could use as much of it as we'll give them. From there, let's go out and have a look at just some ideas again about where we think July into August may land. And I put this in my report that I emailed out yesterday, but I think this is where I've got my analysis landed. I'm watching these two areas of very warm ocean temperatures that are in the North Pacific and North Atlantic. Now, it's the contrast between these two, the heat here and the cooler there, that I say is driving the flow across the Canadian prairie in terms of the jet. What's keeping it farther to the north and really influencing Europe and Russia is this here. But every time, well, not every time, but most times historically when I've seen this, it's anchored ridges at times in the southern plains into the mid-south. And so I want to watch out for that in the month of July coming back and in the month of August as just a potential point of possibly keeping things too hot and dry. Now, what can upset it? All of this. Beryl could do it. Beryl could punch in there and add moisture. But that's, when you see this pattern, that's what I typically get concerned about. Is it showing up, yet? Not really. This would be the last month of sea level pressure anomalies. And we've got one ridge here. We've got something going on there. But we've not we've not increased pressure in this region compared to historical averages as of late. So we're yet to see the permanent ridge build in here. But if these two areas here and here keep getting, higher and higher in pressure compared to average, I think by midsummer we're going to pop something out right there with a larger ridge. Not showing up yet in the models. We still have the anomalous pressure in those areas, but still no reflection of it right here in the middle part of the United States. I do want to zoom in on the U.S. and just kind of give you an update on this. If I can get this to load here. Sorry if it's slow. This is the 30-day outlook on temperatures. Again, we'll just go out there to mid-August. How about that? We'll stop there. August through August 11th. And there is some sort of reflection of what I'm concerned about here. And it's also shown up in the precipitation anomalies. You'll just notice it in this loads that we've got some dryness in the models beginning to show up in this area that I just want to be aware of. And while I still think that this needs to be a bit farther to the south, and we'll probably get more ridge riding storms over the top of this, just need to look at it. Models have been aggressively wet in this area. Big question mark on that because they were way too wet early in the season for this part of the southeast to the mid-Atlantic. All right, last couple of things. I just want to take note here as we get this playing of the dust coming off the Sahara. And while this dust is being carried by Beryl, we just noticed that behind it, even though there's these very nice African easterly waves, there's a lot of dust getting chewed on the northern side of this. And we just have to think about what that could do. But again, when I see dust like this coming off the Sahara, it is an indicator of kind of an active monsoonal time frame. And you can even see the cooler conditions that are being forecast here, largely due to cloud cover and storms. And when we watch this, it's just something to keep an eye on for the activity in this hurricane season. The other thing I want you to think about for the next 10 days here is just the heat that's coming into parts of Eastern Europe, specifically Ukraine and Western Russia, because the models continue to hit that same region with drier than average conditions. And this is, as we looked at the NDVI analysis yesterday, becoming a problem. Surges of the Indian monsoon have now hit the Ganges River Valley, which was very dry back in May and June. And we see a lot of storm activity now north of the Yangtze. It's drier south of the Yangtze where there had been flooding. This is now hitting the dry regions to the north, which needs to be watched carefully because this could be a really good, rainfall to increase, the potential across a very, very agriculturally productive area. Other than that, decent rains coming into parts of, South Australia, New South Wales, getting up to Queensland that are needed as well. And I think the other big thing I'll just be watching is the train of potential systems coming off of this region, getting out into the open Atlantic and potentially just making their way toward the Caribbean, Western Atlantic, and Gulf of Mexico. All right, that's a lot, but that's what we're covering today, and we'll just watch it and report back to you again tomorrow. Have a good one. Thanks.